let's all be honest. If John Adams or Alexander Hamilton or Oliver Wolcott or Pickering or one of those mini Pinckneys, there's so many of them, and they all have 4 names, and it's very confusing. They're all from South Carolina, which we all know is always causing trouble. I get so tired of the Pinckneys. Are there any There are probably some Pinckneys here, aren't there? This reminds me of one of my, sorry, just very briefly, a quick Sewanee story. A dear friend of mine who died about 3 years ago was a classics professor at Sewanee who, in legend, was giving a speech at a garden club about the Peloponnesian War, and it's Sewanee, and it's a weird place. And a woman came up afterward and said, "Oh, Dr. Benneker, I was so interested in what you said about the Medes and the Persians. You know, my mother was a Mede." Actually, that is a true story. I don't know where I got to there. Oh, Pinckney. If Pinckney, that's okay. We're there. If someone else had tried to buy Louisiana and had contemplated the extension of executive and extra constitutional powers, Jefferson's head would have exploded. Let's be honest. You can write the letters now, but he saw it as a good thing. He saw it as national survival. It was the great example for him to say that adherence to the written letter of the law is a high duty of the chief magistrate, but not the highest. A spirit that informed Franklin Roosevelt when he was trying to help Britain. And in fact, FDR explicitly referred back to the Louisiana Purchase when he was trying to push through Lend-Lease as an example of presidents acting in what they saw to be the best interest of the nation, even if Congress wasn't with them. So initially, Louisiana comes up. Jefferson says, well, we have to go to the people, draft the amendment. So they draft the constitutional amendment. And then on the 21st or 22nd of August, a letter arrives from Paris saying that Napoleon is rethinking this very poor deal he had made. So suddenly we don't really need a constitutional amendment anymore. So much for that. And so by the 23rd of August, Jefferson is writing as though it's a fait accompli and decides he does not need to follow undoubtedly what his philosophical creed would have led him to do. And so it was one of the great pragmatic decisions. It changed the nature of the country. It arguably is the most significant thing that happened from the Revolution until, I would say, till Jackson fought off nullification, and arguably it's more important than that. He departed from dogma to do it, and was willing to do so in the cause of the survival and success of the country, no matter what. That gave him a reputation among his contemporaries as a slippery man, as a duplicitous man, as a politician in the worst sense of the word, as a double dealer, all of which are synonymous with successful politician. You know, one man's double dealer is another man's Franklin Roosevelt. FDR once said, "I'm a juggler. I never let my left hand know what my right hand is doing." And I think that's something that Thomas Jefferson would have deeply appreciated. So be daring, depart from dogma, and here's something I think that I hope President Obama, as he returns for another 4 years, learns from Jefferson. You've got to sit down with these people, even if you don't like them, and particularly if you don't like them. Every night when Congress was in session, Jefferson had dinner with members of Congress. He did not have, interestingly, it was not a big bipartisan kumbaya kind of thing. It was all Federalists or all Republicans, which, when you're thinking about Jefferson, you're thinking about his politics, and you sort of, there's a temptation to want him to have been some kind of paragon so that we could follow that and learn from that. My own view is that we don't learn very much from paragons. We learn more from people who are flawed and sinful and full of failings, because I don't know about you all, but those 3 things certainly describe me. And realizing that most historical heroes were men before they were monuments, I think makes their experience more accessible and more useful than idealizing it or airbrushing it. And I salute, again, Monticello for their remarkable scholarly courage through the years on many issues. I see my friend Andrew Jackson O'Shaughnessy violating the Carville rule. Andrew is the only English named after Andrew Jackson. It shows a certain parental confusion. We're working on that in therapy down at the Smith Center, and so if y'all want to, or as I say, this is like the Robert H. Smith Seaboard in terms of American history. He did not want to risk having the dinner table become a free-for-all, though he wanted everybody to sit wherever they wanted to sit, but politically. So having Republicans and Federalists fighting each other at his table was not something he was interested in. What he was interested in was getting his measures through. John Quincy Adams remarked that there are no measures that are not the administration's that pass. And what I think Jefferson did quite brilliantly is he made sure he created attachments to him. Because if you're going to have a presidential system, if you're going to have a chief magistrate, then that magistrate needs to be able to act chiefly. And by building these relationships, you see it in the New Hampshire Senator William Plumer, who starts out about 1801, 1802 with the Federalist caricature of Jefferson as this demonic Virginian, awful slaveholder, terrible Republican, Francophile fanatic who wanted to get a guillotine set up. I mean, it goes on and on. By 1807, after having dinner with him again and again and again, they're exchanging pecan recipes. Literally. They give each other I can't remember who gave who the nuts, but they give each other the nuts, and they talk about, oh, when you plant these nuts, your descendants will eat the nuts that I gave you because they're our nuts. I mean, they're just on I mean, it's this high exchange. But what's so amazing is he has taken a man who was an implacable foe and brilliantly managed him simply by having him around. Presidents are immensely powerful in that way. Any powerful person is. But the White House, even then, the president's house, even then, was the most powerful weapon a president had. And it may have been drafty, and Meriwether Lewis may have been upstairs, and the mockingbirds may have been making too much noise, and Abigail Adams' laundry still might have been up there. Whatever the problem is, whatever it is, the president was the center of the drama. And Jefferson understood that and used it. He brought people in. He talked to them. He listened to them, more importantly. And they didn't all love him. He didn't get 100% votes all the time, but he got enough. He got enough. And so I hope that's something that we can learn something from without being too reductionist. The other thing that I think is, what to me was fascinating was, and this is where Jefferson's philosophy and his politics intersect, is he is the first great politician of optimism in the American experiment. When you think about it, the presidents who win and do well are always ones who can conjure a picture of a future that is more appealing than the present. We don't have successful presidents who run on fear. We have successful presidents are successful who run on hope. And it's not an effervescent sort of feel-good thing. It's a fundamental political transaction between a leader and a people that if you sacrifice in the moment, you are not simply paying a price. It's not paying for pain's sake. It is an investment. And you invest, you give up something now so that you will have more in the future, or that you or your descendants will. And Jefferson was brilliantly discussed this. I think far more so than any of the other founders. John Adams gets a slightly bum rap because he would get so angry and talk. Like all of us, we should learn from that. But it drove Jefferson bananas. That's a technical historical term. I don't know if Andrew knows about that one, but it's It drove him crazy when Adams addressed a group of demonstrators once in Philadelphia and said that you will not move knowledge past that which your fathers have achieved. Jefferson went crazy and for years talked about it's just not true that knowledge, science, that discovery, whether it's politics or zoology or the room of bones he had set up in the White House for people to come look at. My favorite, well, I think maybe my favorite detail, two things. Zebulon Pike sent him 2 grizzly cubs without a cage. Thank you, General Pike. And so they're attacking people on the White House lawn. And finally they had to send it to the Peel Zoo, but it took a while. So that kind of undercut the dining together. That was a tricky season for that example. And then he's setting up this room full of bones from Lewis and Clark and inviting people to come. And it was the world's first discovery museum. It was in the White House. It's amazing. And imagine a president. It's just terrific. He wanted the president's house, the presidency, to be the center not only of politics but of culture, which is another contradiction if you're being quite specific about Jeffersonian philosophy, because politics is not supposed to be the center of everything. The rest of life is. But again, Jefferson tended to change his mind if he was the one in the center. Again, I don't know about you all, it sounds somewhat familiar to me. He said of the American people, whatever they can, they will. Whatever they can, they will. There's a quick final point on that. I don't think it's a mistake that 2 of the most important political figures of the second half of the 20th century were both actors, Ronald Reagan and John Paul II, because they were able to conjure a vision of a reality that people could not see and convince people of its reality. And Jefferson had a good bit of that. He was able to do it. He was fortunate to be born and to come to power and to spend his years in an age where writing was so important. He was clearly our finest president, finest writer to have been president. And the role of newspapers, the role of that form of mass communications, I think is sometimes misunderstood. We did kind of have an internet. We had partisan newspapers that would often repeat anonymous stories that had no pretense to being fact-checked in any way. There were early bloggers. And as we all know, Jefferson was an investor in some of those things. And paid a mighty price. So the political culture, while totally different and we can't rip them out of their context and all of that, Mark Twain was right. It may not repeat itself, but boy, does it rhyme with what we're dealing with. So the idea that we can't learn from Jefferson or Washington or Adams, all of them, in terms of their lives were particular, their problems were particular, but their lives and their problems have perennial characteristics. And I think that that's one of the reasons to look back and to study history, is to see that we faced seemingly insuperable obstacles before and we overcame them. And in that sense, history is not, as it's been said, a bedtime story, but it can be an instructive story. And that's one of the reasons I did this book.